Hello, everyone, and good day. Today, we are going to have the principles and theories of language, acquisition, and learning for our ADEPT EL 103. I am Ms. Angelica Jimenez, and we are going to have a recap of the basic and the most important concepts regarding theories for language acquisition and learning. So, let's start. First and foremost, of course, we have to review what's the difference between language learning and language acquisition. Well, according to Stephen Krashen, he was the one who actually differentiate the two. For some, it will be just a general that they're like the same, but for English majors, there's a big difference. Whenever we talk about acquisition, it's implicit, meaning you are not aware that you are learning it. It's subconscious. But in learning, we are actually conscious that we want to learn something. We also have informal. If it's acquisition, it happens everywhere, not just inside the classroom. Whenever you talk to someone, whenever you look at something, it's an acquisition of something. But in learning, we are in a school, in a formal situation wherein we really intend to learn something. Acquisition also do not care about grammar. As long as you can understand, it's a matter of acquiring new knowledge. However, for learning, we are very strict in terms of the grammar rules because it's a formal setup. It's a classroom. Therefore, as much as possible, we have to be a perfect model. And last but not the least, the acquisition really depends on one's attitude. If you're in the mood of wanting to acquire a language or maybe a knowledge, therefore, everywhere you go, you will really learn something. However, for learning, it's not just about the attitude. The aptitude wherein your intellect, okay, your intellectual capacity has a big factor as to how you will learn something. Okay, so that's the huge difference between the two. Now, there are theories for the first language acquisition. Whenever we talk about language acquisition, it's about learning something subconsciously. Our first language, we learn it subconsciously, right? And the first theory about that is behavioristic theory or behavioristic approaches. Behavioristic approaches in extreme manner believes in tabula rasa. Whenever we talk about tabula rasa, we believe that when a child is born, A is in blank slate. No knowledge at all, and the surroundings will be the one to suffice or give that knowledge. Also, behavioristic approach focus on observable responses, something we can observe. We learn our language, our first language, because we notice our parents saying these things. We notice our father, our mother, our siblings saying those words, so we imitate it. Is an example of behavioristic theory. Also, whenever we talk about behavioristic approaches, there is like a stimuli and a response. Like when you hear this, you have to do something. A stimuli, for example, is when a baby sees his or her mother. Now, when the baby sees his mother, the tendency is that the baby will say mama. Okay, that's the response. The stimuli is the mother saying the mother. The response will be saying mama. Therefore, the language is being used stating the word mama. And that will be a habit eventually if it continues. Okay, that's behavioristic. We believe that we learn a language from the surroundings, from which or what is around us. One good example of this is when you notice our child, for example, kids learning from television. Okay, that's a one good example of that. Number two is a nativist theory. This theory is like a counterpart of behaviorism, wherein they believe that the child is born with knowledge, not blank. Okay, we already have a structure inside our brain, like for example, Chomsky's language acquisition device, in which it comes from the inside and then we just produce it. However, in behavioristic, it comes from the outside, then we imitate and we copy it. Okay, so it's innately determined. We already have what's inside our brain. Last but not least is the cognitive theory. This third theory is the combination of behaviorism, and nativism. Okay, like we learn from the surroundings as well as our innate structures inside our head. So So there are actually components of cognitive learning. The first one is comprehension. We have to actually understand something before we learn it, right? Okay. Second, memory. After you understand, it has to be retained. Okay. And you learned it if it is retained. Remember, students, it will not be learning if you forget it. Okay. And then the third is application. After you understand, after you memorize what about this language, then it's time to apply it. For example, when you learn your Filipino language, like the Tagalog language, first you realize what is the meaning of mamam. Okay, for a baby, mamam. And then the baby realizes, mamam means water. Whenever I say mamam, I have water. Then the baby actually acquires it in his or her memory. And then later on, the mamam term is being produced. He applied it, say mamam, and he or she received the water. Okay? So there's also what we call a cognitive loop. This is the comprehension, memory, and application we're talking about. Now, aside from these three, we also have the Rome-Brunner's enactive, iconic, and symbolic representation. This is a three-tiered representation. The first tier is enactive. It's about action, muscles, using the muscles. Second is iconic, drawings, images. And then the third is symbolic, graphs, letters, and even symbols. Okay? And one good example is this one, the baby learning about dogs. The first is inactive, wherein the baby will copy, imitate the sound of the dog saying arf arf. And then the iconic is seeing or drawing a dog, a picture of a dog. And later on, the kid will realize, oh, the spelling of the dog is D-O-G. Okay, that's what happens for this top tier, the three-tier rather representation of Brunner. Now, another cognitive proponent is John Piaget. John Piaget has the three: assimilation, accommodation, and equilibration. Whenever we talk about assimilation, it is simply acquiring, okay? Simply acquiring everything we know, okay? When you learn something, it's related to what you see, so you acquire it. For example, you have a dog. You know that a dog has whiskers, and then a dog barks, and then this dog is a Shih Tzu. Okay, it has four legs and so on and so forth. Now, while you're walking, you see a different version of a dog, maybe a poodle. Okay, and then when you see this poodle, you realize, it's another form of dog. Okay, but with another breed. It's a dog, but with another breed. That's an example of assimilation because they both bark, they both have whiskers and stuff. Now, while you continue walking, you suddenly see an animal who meows. Okay? It no longer barks. Therefore, this will be accommodation. You will realize that even though this animal has four legs, still, this animal is not a dog. It's a cat. Now, it's a accommodation already. And equilibration happens is that when you realize that there are other animals that has 4 feet but is not called cats or dogs. It can be a horse, a zebra, or anything. Okay, so that's John Piaget's vital components of learning. So yeah, as an example that we have. Now, we have this, the structural linguistics and behavioral psychology. Let's talk about this. Whenever we talk about structural linguistics, we pay attention with the language, okay? The study of language, of the formal units, the phonology, grammar, sentence, syntax, semantics, all the structures of the language is being studied, okay? That's what structural linguistics is observable. Okay? Because we can see it. For example, what is the spelling of the word cat? So you will realize it has C-A-T and it sounds like K-A-T. So everything is observable because you see a C, you see a A, you see a T, and the sounds even. And it only covers those observable responses. It does not cover anything beyond that. And these are the advocates for structural linguistics. We have Leonard Bloomfield. We also have Edward Tafir, Charles Hockett is also there, and Charles Price. All of these linguists believe and study the language based on its structure and observable stimuli, observable factors. Okay, now let's move on with behavioral psychology. Linguistic focuses on the language. Psychology now focuses on how we learn a language. It also focuses on observable responses like the linguistic, okay, the structural linguistic that can be observed, measured, okay? And the concept of it is it does not believe, okay, it does not believe with mentalistic or illegitimate domains like intuition, okay? It's not like that. That's why structural linguistic and behavioral psychology goes along in learning. They believe that when you learn something, okay, it should be observable, something that you can see, something that you can sense, right? So these are some behavioral model in learning something. We have B.F. Skinner, Ivan Pavlov rather, classical conditioning. There's this response and stimuli. Remember the bell and the dog? Yeah. Operant conditioning of B.F. Skinner, reinforcement and punishment. We also have the rote verbal learning, okay, a memorization technique based on repetition. And this one is also from Skinner. Discrimination learning is from also Pavlov, wherein we respond to something based on a certain stimuli. Like, you know the differences between the doorbell, the bell in the classroom, the ice cream bell. Yeah, all of these are all bells, but you know how to respond when you hear these three. You respond differently, right? Okay, so that's it. After we have that, there's also generative linguistic and cognitive psychology. This one, if structural linguistic and behavioral psychology focuses on observable responses, this two focuses on beyond observed. Okay? So what is this? Noam Chomsky is one good example because Noam Chomsky is the proponent of LAD, the language acquisition device, right? So it believes that there is something that cannot be observed inside our brain. Okay? It's not only interested in describing what the language is, like the structure, because Chomsky believed that beyond the structure, there should be a meaning behind that. Okay? We cannot limit language with observed or the structures alone. We have to look beyond the language. So what are we talking about? We also have here Ferdinand de Saussure. With Ferdinand de Saussure, there's what he called as our, the observed, the performance, and the competence. Okay, whenever we have the performance, it's the act presenting the language. It's like the observe, but the competence is something about our intellectual, our capacity to learn the language. This is the mentalistic view of language. Like, do you believe that even though you have the similar, okay, you have similar observe, um, observe language, still you will learn differently. Okay. Now, there's another. Okay, the cognitive psychology goes along. Okay, it's beyond the observed response. And last but not least is constructivism. Constructivism is again a combination of the two. Okay, like it's not just about the outside, it's also about the inside, not just the competence, but also the performance. So what is constructivism? This is the overall perception in learning the language. We have to maximize all the senses that we have. Okay. It's also an idea that people actively construct or make their own language. That's the thing. That's why we need the environment and also our capability, our innate capability. Like, for example, you actually encounter from surroundings a certain word. You can only have or you can only process that if you have this innate capability to process that word. Okay, so both should be included in learning. So there are two branches of constructivism. We have cognitive constructivism by John Piaget, and The Social Constructivism by Vygotsky. To make it simple, cognitive constructivism focuses on you alone creating meaning out of the concept. But in social constructivism, you need other people to help you scaffold and be guided in learning the concept or in learning the language. Okay? Then we also have here the social cultural dimension of second language. Like whenever we learn our second language, there is the consideration of mind, how you think, the language, the epistemology, the origin, and the recognition of how you think. Okay, that's the overall view of social cultural dimension in learning the second language. It's not easy to learn English. Our second language is English, right? And it's not that easy to learn, especially if we are actually dwelling on two languages. Okay? And speaking of making it difficult to learn the language, there are theories for learning. Not really learning, but acquiring the second language. So, Krashen believed that second language should not be learned, but be acquired. He only means that whenever we learn a language, it has to be in a natural way. Okay, so let's take a look at the 5 hypotheses of Krashen. The first one is acquisition learning. Okay, here we believe that when you learn something, it can be an acquired. When we say an acquired system, you first experience learning the language from the surrounding, and then later on in the school, you realize, this is the term. This is what we call as it is. Like for example, you think you discover that every time there's a plural form, you add s. Okay, so nalalagyan mo na lagi ng S. Now, what happens is that when you go to school, you realize, oh, it's part of the subject-verb agreement. Okay, that's acquired system. But the learned system is that you learn it first at school and then you apply it. Okay? The second hypothesis is the monitor hypothesis. Krashen believes that at the back of our brain, we have this monitor. Okay, that tells us what's wrong, tells us what we are writing. There are lapses in our writing. And here's a picture of a monitor hypothesis. We have to know that whenever there's a monitor, it depends on what? On our competence. Kasi hindi mo naman malalaman na mali ka kung hindi mo inaral yung concept na yon. Diba? So that's the monitor. The more you know about the language, the more your monitor will work. Okay? So the competence is very important. And then it's like para siyang filter. Yan, pinifilter niya. Before mo i-produce, iniisip mo muna kung tama, tapos tsaka mo sasabihin or isusulat. Okay? Third is the input hypothesis. Whenever we talk about the input hypothesis, this is acquisition and not learning. Our learning depends on what is being input to us. Whatever the content is being given or served to us. And they say whenever we learn, it has to be I plus 1. I is you plus 1. One level above your level. Not I plus 3, I plus 5. It should be just one level. Because if it's too easy, they will get bored. They already know it. If it's too hard, they will also not get interested because it's too hard for them. They don't know how to solve or how to pronounce or how to spell it. Okay? They will not be interested to learn the language. Lastly, not really the last one, but the fourth, second to the last, is the affective filter. Do you believe that when you learn a language, our affective filter also works? The more we are motivated, the more we learn, right? For example, for you English majors, you really wanted to speak English because you are English majors, right? There is a huge motivation for you to learn. Also, your confidence. Whenever you have low self-esteem and low self-esteem in using the English language, the tendency is that you will not use English because your self-confidence is low. Anxiety, and of course, your personal traits. Okay, so that's it also affects our way of using the language or learning the language. This is the last one, the natural order. The natural order follows Krashen beliefs with Chomsky, knowing that whenever we learn something, it's a pattern. Yeah, there is like a pattern of it. Like it started with this, you first learn this concept, then this. There is an order. That's according to Krashen. Okay? So those are the variables, five hypotheses of Stephen Krashen. Okay? Now, speaking of this hypothesis, the way we also learn language, our second language, depends on these five. Our acculturation, the way you accumulate culture, the more immersed you are with the culture, the more you will be be intact with the language. Second is filter, what we talk about. Age, your comprehensible input, what you receive, and also the more exposed you are with the language. Okay? So that's a five causative variable. Now, let's just have a brief run through about the approaches to language teaching. How should we teach? As future English major, future English teacher, how should we teach English? Okay, these are some approaches. First one is direct method. Whenever we see direct method, this is the traditional way. Okay? We also have yung grammar, the grammar one, where you focus in the grammar. Direct method is you give them, okay? You give them what they have to you give them what they have to learn. And your instruction is exclusively for target language. The way you use the language is um English, the way you instruct them English. Unlike the first one, yung grammar translation method. Yung grammar translation method, they use the, native language in teaching the target language, which is ironic. Because whenever you teach English, you have to use the English language, right? We also have audiolingual. Audiolingual, what you have to remember here is it's repetition, okay, and use of drills. Okay, every time like spelling, yeah, that's the example of audiolingual. Natural approach is another one. Like you immerse them in real scenario to use English. And five, cognitive code can be divided in four. Silent way, Suggestopedia, community language learning, and total physical response. Ayan, cognitive code yan. Because we focuses on the cognitive thinking of a child. Silent way focuses on silence. When you teach them, you ask question, you give them a way to think through silence. Next is Suggestopedia. Suggest what they can learn most. Do they learn when they are listening with music? Best while dancing. So that's Suggestopedia. Okay. And then we also have here the total physical response using actions. Every time you teach them a word, you use an action like silence, like that. Okay. And then last but not least is sorry. I think I missed something. Yung community language learning. Ito naman, the teacher acts like a counselor. They act as a counselor and the child is like a client and they have to learn the language with that setup. Okay? Oral situational approach is when the children use their hearing. For example, yung mga pronunciation practice, ayan, they use it in a context. And CLT, ito na yun, yung it's opposition of the audiolingual method. Ang audiolingual kasi, drills tsaka memorization. Si CLT, pragmatic. Talagang yung practical usage, okay, of the language. So, yeah, those are the 7 approaches that we have. It's like a review, so it's like a run through. Now, let's have the principles. What are the principles? How can we say that when we learn when we teach language, how should we view it? Okay, so let's see. First one, you have to know that the student is the language learner. It's not the teacher. You as a teacher should guide them. And the student is the one you should focus. Number 2, the language learning and teaching are shaped by student needs and objectives. Hindi yung kung anong madali kay i-teacher, ayun yung ituturo niya. It's not like that. You have to design your curriculum. You have to design your lesson plan based on their need and also the objective of the curriculum. Third, language learning and teaching are based on normal uses of language. Whenever we teach them, okay, an English language, can they use it outside? Baka naman mamaya pa nagtuturo tayo, hindi naman nila nagagamit every day. So make sure that they can use it. Next, it classroom relations reflect mutual liking and respect, allowing for both teacher personality and student personality in a non-threatening atmosphere. So, it's a good thing if the use of language is not something that makes you nervous, but confident. Okay, like whenever you use English language, you're actually more motivated because it's a non-threatening and it's a conducive classroom. Okay? Basic to language use are knowledge of language and control of language. Knowledge is one. The control is like the grammar. You already have the knowledge what's English, but now it's time to apply those grammar rules and stuff. Also, the development of language control proceeds through creativity. So how can we say that we can control the language? Like we can do public speaking, we could do dramatization, those examples. And then every possible medium and modality is used, any kind. May it be like textbook and authentic materials, it can be used to aid learning. You can let your students go outside and learn the language. Testing is an aid to learning. Still, we need to test them. We need to see if they are really learning something. Language learning is also penetrating another culture. It means that when you learn a language, you are also learning their culture. Okay? So you have to also introduce them with the culture of the language, the English language. And last but not the least, the real world extends beyond the classroom walls. Language learning takes place in and out of the classroom. Do not box yourself, teachers, in learning and teaching the language. You have to go out, go beyond what you know in teaching the language. And in that way, they will be more motivated and interested to learn English. So I hope that you learned something from this review. Thank you so much. So if you have any questions, you may just PM me. I do not have any questions. So here's a key takeaway before we end. Whatever method you choose, always make sure that it is holistic development of the students you are targeting. Lagi-lagi para sa bata. Thank you so much and have a good day. Bye-bye.